There was this dude in the Bible, Methuselah, who lived to be 969 years old, almost 1,000 years. Can you imagine? He saw entire generations pop into existence and then fade away. He knew his great-grandparents' great-grandparents. And get this, when he finally kicked the bucket, the whole world got wiped out in a flood. That's a long life right there. But here's the real head-scratcher. Why in the world did God let him stick around for so long? What was so special about this silent old patriarch, whose name you only ever hear in Genesis? And why did his death line up perfectly with the year of the flood? Some folks say his name was a secret prophecy. Others think every year he lived was like a bonus round of divine mercy. All we really know for sure is this: he was the last connection between the Garden of Eden and the big smackdown, between creation in its prime and a world so messed up it needed a hard reset. Today, we're diving into the story of the guy who basically laughed in the face of time. And stick around till the end, because I'm going to break down the hidden meaning of Methuselah's name. A message that'll totally change how you see God's patience. So, buckle up for the story of Methuselah, the mystery of the man who lived 969 years. When you crack open Genesis, chapter 5, you stumble across something pretty wild. A list of names: Adam, Seth, Enosh, Enoch, and each one comes with their age. But one name jumps off the page. Methuselah, son of Enoch, clocked in at 969 years. 969 years. Wrap your head around that for a sec. While you're just trying to live your life, Methuselah was still getting started. He watched the world morph in ways nobody else ever has. He saw civilizations get built from the ground up. He saw evil take root and spread. He watched hope slowly drain from the eyes of humanity. But who was this guy, really? The Bible doesn't spill a ton of details about his personality. No famous speeches, no miracles, just the basics. When he was born, how old he was when he had kids, and when he died. But even those numbers tell a way bigger story than you might think. Methuselah wasn't just kicking around for the sake of it. Every year he was alive was a reminder, a silent countdown, a warning from up above written not on stone tablets, but on a human being. He was God's timer. And when that timer went off, judgment was coming. Ever wonder why God picked a dude to represent how patient he was? Why not a monument? Why not some signs in the sky? Because God wanted people to look at Methuselah and remember. As long as he's still breathing, there's still time. To really get Methuselah, you gotta understand the world he was living in. It wasn't the world we know today. Back then, time worked different. People lived way longer, and the memory of Eden was still fresh in their minds. But it was also a world falling apart, morally speaking. Picture it. Cities blowing up, populations going through the roof. Genesis 6 tells us that the sons of God were checking out the daughters of men, and thinking they were pretty hot. There was some weird stuff going down between the spiritual and physical worlds. Giants, the Nephilim, were walking around. Violence was spreading like the flu. People were wicked to the core, and all they could think about was doing bad stuff. Methuselah saw it all. He was there when God's creation started to go sideways. He was there when powerful people turned into bullies. When justice got replaced by muscle. When people forgot God's name in the streets and the markets. And while the world was going to hell in a handbasket, he just kept on living year after year, decade after decade, century after century. A walking, talking reminder that God hadn't thrown in the towel yet. That the door to grace was still open. But for how much longer? Every morning Methuselah woke up was another day of mercy. Every sunset was another chance that humanity blew. And he knew, because his dad had told him, that one day when his heart stopped, the heavens were going to open up and flood the place. Methuselah wasn't just some dude who lived a long time. He was part of a holy family tree, a line connecting the first man to the guy who would save humanity from drowning. Let's trace that line, because every name here matters. Adam, the first man, made in God's image. He had Seth after Abel got killed and Cain got the boot. Seth had Enosh. And the Bible says that's when people started calling on God's name. Enosh had Kenan. Kenan had Mahalalel. Mahalalel had Jared. And Jared had Enoch. Enoch, the guy who walked with God. And Enoch had Methuselah. Methuselah had Lamech. And Lamech had Noah, the dude who built the ark. 8 generations from Adam to Noah. And smack dab in the middle of that line was Methuselah, the longest link. Do you get what this means? Methuselah lived long enough to actually know Adam. Yep, Adam was still around when Methuselah was born. He could hear straight from the horse's mouth about the Garden of Eden, the snake, the fall, and the promise that things would get better. And Methuselah also got to see his grandson Noah. He was alive when Noah started preaching about the coming storm. He saw the ark being built. Maybe he even helped slap some planks on there. He was the bridge, the living link between paradise lost and the hope for the future. Adam's family tree isn't just a list of names. It's a golden thread running through human history. And Methuselah was the longest piece of that thread, stretched to its breaking point by God's patience. Before we get more into Methuselah, we gotta talk about his dad, because you can't get the son without knowing the father. And Enoch wasn't just any dad. He was the guy who disappeared. Genesis 5 verse 22 says that Enoch walked with God for 300 years after Methuselah was born. 300 years of hanging out with the Creator. Not just some religious show. Not just going through the motions. It was a real deep connection. And then, bam, something crazy happened. Enoch walked with God. And then he was gone. God took him. He didn't die. He didn't get sick. He just got beamed up, taken straight into God's presence without dying. Imagine what that did to Methuselah. His dad literally vanished in front of everyone. One minute he was there, the next he wasn't. What kind of faith does that build in a kid? What kind of respect? What kind of certainty about the unseen world? Methuselah grew up in the shadow of a spiritual giant. He knew God was real because he saw his dad get taken by him. He knew there was more to life than what you can see, and he carried that with him for the next 969 years. The thing Enoch passed down wasn't money or stuff. It was rock-solid faith. A belief that God sees, God hears, and God acts. And Methuselah lived every one of his long years knowing that. Oh, and hey, if you're digging this story, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because we've got way more to unpack about the mysteries of the Bible. And turn on those notifications so you don't miss anything. Alright, let's keep going. Now, we get to the big question everyone asks. Is it even possible for someone to live 969 years? And if it is, why? What's the deal with such a crazy long life? First off, let's be clear. The Bible takes these numbers at face value. There's nothing to suggest they're just symbols or exaggerations. The Hebrew text is pretty straightforward. Methuselah lived 187 years and had Lamech. After that, he lived another 782 years and had more kids, adding up to 969 years. But why was living to be super old so common before the flood? There are a few ideas floating around. Some experts think the Earth's atmosphere was different back then, maybe with a layer of water vapor protecting it from harmful radiation. Others suggest that human genes were still pretty close to Adam's perfect DNA, without all the mutations that have piled up over time. But the real reason goes deeper than science. God was giving people time. Time to have families. Time for the message of righteousness to spread. Time to turn things around. And Methuselah was the timer for all of that. Every year he lived was another year of God's patience. Every birthday was a reminder. God hasn't brought the hammer down yet. People could look at that old guy and think, hey, as long as Methuselah's still kicking, we're good. But there's more to it. Some Hebrew scholars say that the name Methuselah means, when he dies, it will be sent, or his death will bring. It was a prophetic name, a secret warning. God was saying, I'm giving you a clear sign. When this guy's gone, judgment's coming. Methuselah held a special place in history. He was the last bridge between the world before the flood and the world after. And he knew it. Think about the responsibility that puts on a guy. He wasn't just surviving. He was guarding memories. A walking history book of God's promises. And as the years went by, Methuselah watched the world get worse and worse. The Bible paints a pretty grim picture of humanity before the flood. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil all the time. But still, Methuselah lived. He saw 9 centuries of things going downhill, 9 centuries of warnings being ignored, 9 centuries of God reaching out and people turning away. And the whole time, just by being alive, he was preaching a silent sermon. There's still time. The Bible doesn't go into detail about his death, but the timing is clear. He died the same year as the flood. Some experts think it was right before the rain started. Others think it was sometime during that year. Either way, the divine timer finally went off, and with it, God's patience for that generation ran out. Now, we need to talk about Methuselah's grandson, Noah, because their stories are tied together. One lived as the last representative of the old world. The other was picked to be the first of the new world. Methuselah had Lamech, and when Lamech had Noah, he said something pretty deep. This one will comfort us concerning our labor and the toil of our hands because of the ground which the Lord has cursed. He was hoping that Noah would bring some kind of change for the better. And he did, but not in the way they expected. Methuselah watched Noah grow up. He saw God's calling on him. He saw his grandson start preaching righteousness to a messed-up generation. And he saw the giant boat being built in the middle of dry land, miles from any water. For 120 years, Noah built the ark and warned people about the coming flood. And the whole time, Methuselah was alive, watching, maybe even helping out, definitely praying, because he knew that when his life ended, everything would change. When he dies, it will be sent. The world Methuselah had known for almost 1,000 years vanished, and only 8 people survived. There's something really symbolic about Methuselah's death, something that a lot of people miss at first. But when you get the meaning of his name, it all clicks. In Hebrew, Methuselah is a combo of 2 words. Muth means his death, and shalak means to bring or to send. So it literally means when he dies, it will be sent or his death will bring. What would be sent? The flood. Now you see why God let him live so long. It wasn't just random. It wasn't some weird divine experiment. It was mercy taken to the limit. Every day Methuselah was alive was another day of grace for humanity. Every heartbeat was a chance to turn things around. God could have sent the flood 500 years earlier, or 700 years earlier. Things were already bad. But he waited. He waited until the last member of Adam's family tree finished his job. He waited until even his infinite patience ran out in the face of never-ending rebellion. Methuselah's death was like the last grain of sand falling through an hourglass. When that man died, the time for mercy was over. Not because God's a jerk, but because justice is also part of who he is. And here's something that'll really make you think. According to the Bible's timeline, Methuselah died in the exact same year the flood came. Not a year before, not a year after, but the exact year. God's timing is mind-blowing. That means that God knew from the day Methuselah was born exactly how much time he was giving humanity. 969 years, no more, no less. And every one of those years was counted, weighed, and measured on the scales of eternity. Then came the flood, and with it, the end of everything Methuselah had known. The Bible describes the flood in a way that still gives you chills. On that day all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. It wasn't just rain. It was creation itself turning against creation. Underground water exploded upwards. Water poured down from the sky. The earth turned into one giant ocean. Cities disappeared. Mountains were covered. Every living thing on earth died. Birds, farm animals, wild animals, creepy crawlies, and people. Everything that breathed air. Everything on dry land. And with that, the time of the old patriarchs was over. The time when people lived for centuries. The time when people could see history unfold over hundreds of years. Nobody would ever live 969 years again. Nobody would ever have that much time to learn and remember. The flood didn't just wipe out lives. It wiped out entire civilizations. It wiped out cities whose names we'll never know. It wiped out technology that we'll never find. It wiped out memories, stories, legacies. But it didn't wipe out God's promise. Inside that floating ark, 8 people carried the hope for the future. Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. They were the new beginning, humanity's second shot. And they were all there because Methuselah had done his job and lived until the time was right. When Methuselah died, the last thread connecting the world before the flood to the world after was cut. He was the last one with bloodlines that went way back to creation. The last one to hear stories about the Garden of Eden from someone who had almost been there. And when he was gone, an entire era was buried with him, soon to be washed away for good. But what does Methuselah's life mean for us today? Why does this story still matter thousands of years later? Because it shows us something really important about God's character. He's incredibly patient, but his patience doesn't mean he'll never do anything. Every day Methuselah lived was God showing mercy. God doesn't want to see bad people die, says the prophet Ezekiel. He wants everyone to turn away from evil and learn the truth. And for 969 years, he showed that through one man. Think about the numbers here. 969 years, 11,628 months, about 354,000 days. Every sunrise was a new chance. Every sunset was a warning that went unheeded. And God waited. He waited longer than any of us would. But there's another side to the story. Justice has to be served. When the Apostle Peter wrote his second letter, he brought up the flood to show how God doesn't let evil go unpunished forever. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. Instead, he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. The story of Methuselah has two parts. First, God is more patient than we can even imagine. Second, there's a limit, and when it's reached, judgment comes. So what does that mean for us? Are you living like you're going to live forever? Are you taking advantage of God's patience like it'll never run out? Or do you realize that every day is a gift, an extension of God's grace? Methuselah didn't live 969 years by accident. He lived because God was giving humanity every chance to turn things around. And when they blew it, the door of the ark closed, and it never opened again for that generation. So who was Methuselah, really? He was more than just a guy who lived to be 969 years old. He was the guardian of time, the sign of mercy, the last living reminder of a world that was about to disappear. Methuselah was the man who waited the longest. He waited to see people turn away from evil. He waited to see God's name honored again. He waited for things to change, but the only change that came was judgment. He lived to remember where humanity came from, to remember God's promises, to remember that there are consequences for turning against God. And when his memory was gone, the world he knew vanished with it. But his story lives on, and it teaches us that time matters. Every day is God showing us who he is, whether it's his endless mercy or his justice finally showing up. Today, you can look at the story of Methuselah and see a reflection of where we're at as humanity. We're all living in a time of grace. The Apostle Paul said that God used to overlook ignorance, but now he's telling everyone to turn away from evil. We're living in a time of God's patience. But just like in Methuselah's day, it won't last forever. There's a time coming, a set date, when the door will close. The good news is that, unlike that generation, we have a sure way to escape. Not a wooden ark, but salvation through Jesus Christ. He's our ark. He's our way out. And as long as there's time, that way is still open. Methuselah lived 969 years as a testament to God's patience. And he died as a sign that even patience has its limits. May his story wake us up. May it make us appreciate every day as the gift it is. And may it lead us to get into the ark while there's still time. Because one day, just like in the days of Methuselah, time will run out and then it'll be too late. We've reached the end of this wild ride through the life of Methuselah, the man who lived 969 years. And now you know more than just the numbers. You know the meaning behind them. You've learned that his life was a living prophecy, a divine timer, a showing of God's mercy. But what about you? How does this story fit into your life today? Just like in Methuselah's day, God is still patient. He's giving people time to turn away from evil and come back to him. But his patience isn't the same as being okay with anything. It's love giving us a chance. And one day, this time of grace will end. The good news is that you don't have to wait for a flood to get into the ark. Jesus Christ has already paved the way. He is the door. And as long as you're alive, that door is still open. But don't wait. Don't assume there'll always be a tomorrow. Because, as Methuselah taught us, there's a specific day that God has set. If this video hit you hard, drop a comment below and tell me what you learned about Methuselah. That'll help other people find out about this amazing story. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss the next videos about the mysteries and people in the Bible. Share this video with someone who needs to hear the story of the man who lived 969 years and what it all means. Because this isn't just an old story. It's a message for right now. Remember, time is mercy. Use it wisely. Live every day knowing that it's a gift from God. And don't wait till it's too late to get into the ark of salvation. May the story of Methuselah, the oldest man in the Bible, the last patriarch before the flood, inspire you to appreciate the time God's giving you. And may you choose today to live for the glory of the one who controls time and offers eternity. Until the next video, may God bless you big time.